and inevitably terminal sum of artificial indebtedness by the further unjustifiable imposition of interest, which of course is not justified because this wasn't even the property of the bank, because it isn't a debt to the bank, because the bank is merely a publisher of evidence of our promissory obligations to each other, which publisher absorbs merely the cost, the negligible costs of merely publishing the evidence. So this whole thing is preposterous. But we only compound our errors. We perpetuate the crime ourselves when we ourselves fail to sit down and just get all these things straight in our heads. What is the truth here? Because then and then alone, when we understand this simple obfuscation, this ancient ruse which perpetrator after perpetrator after perpetrator has gotten away with imposing upon unwitting public after unwitting public after unwitting public, not because we're not intelligent enough to know better, but because we're so indifferent that to our own demise, we simply let these things pass above us.
That weekend, Henry Paulson and Timothy Geithner, president of the New York Federal Reserve, called an emergency meeting with the CEOs of the major banks in an effort to rescue Lehman.
This, of course, is how we know unequivocally that these are people who are against us. Instead of rescuing the people from a terminal system of exploitation, they rescue the system from itself so long as they can, so that they can persist in the crimes against us.
But Lehman wasn't alone. Merrill Lynch, another major investment bank, was also on the brink of failure.
Yet, as I've explained, it doesn't matter how many banks or what kind of banks are on the brink of failure. These are peripheral banks, which inherently suffer the consequences of terminal failure as we do, because we are unable to service our debts. The investments of these banks fail because the environment is so degraded by this thing that I call maldisposition of the currency, that is, ever more of the circulation being dedicated to servicing this ever-escalated sum of falsified indebtedness. These are the things that cause all these things, and so their fundamental root cause is this obfuscation of the currency. This is the thing that we have to understand and to resolve, to solve if we are ever going to get beyond these man-made problems which are imposed upon us by unjust men. Now, the thing that gets me beyond this about all this is the brink of failure. Of course, it's possible people just come up with coincident expressions, but I've been elaborating on the issues for 40 plus years, using this brink of failure, because the brink of failure is an obvious segment of the terminal lifespan of such a system, which I've explained, for 40 years, the very form of its inherent failure, that being that once the terminal sum of artificial falsified indebtedness is reached, this compromises the private sector's creditworthiness to borrow further to maintain a vital circulation, thus necessitating federal overspending and other forms of what I've called artificial sustention to reflate the circulation so that the system is given an artificial lifespan further beyond that. So these things were explained long ago, but what bothers me is that my plagiarists, of course, use my terminology as much as they dare. Uh, and here we have a case, regardless of how it's leaked into this documentary. It implies that my work has been read, my work has been studied, perhaps not directly by these people, but think how comprehensive a piece could have been done in collaboration with the author of this thesis of inevitable failure, singular solution, and proof of even a singular prescription for immediately transforming these terminal systems of exploitation into the one and only mathematically perfected economy.
And that Sunday, it was acquired by Bank of America. The only bank interested in buying Lehman was the British firm Barclays. But British regulators demanded a financial guarantee from the U.S. government. Paulson refused.
Of course, Matt doesn't tell us exactly what kind of guarantee was actually requested here, but no matter. The issue is that if things were under control, obviously the sanctity of these entities could be ensured if unless it was known that the credit ratings and state of the lie of economy, which is this terminal system of dispossession, weren't in their terminal throes, their death throes. So what we have here is evidence of the lie itself. Well, Paulson, on the one hand, is assuring us that things are under control, while they can't be under control. At the same time, when it comes to engaging in a binding situation where he's asked to guarantee the sanctity of whatever, of course he avoids doing so. So this is, maybe we understand this, but I have to wonder how we could understand this and not be up in arms about all of this, knowing that we have a means of solution, of achieving, establishing mathematically perfected economy immediately. I mean, the only real end to all this is to fix it. And that means that all of these people, all of these liars, all of these deceivers, all of these cheats, all of these people whose primary and if not singular purpose in life is unearned taking without limit, the only way that we resolve these issues is to end unearned taking, if at least by rectifying the system in the terms which are accomplished by mathematically perfected economy, which terms and which terms only provide for us to avoid being unwitting subjects of these types of ruses. On the other hand, if we're not good enough to protect ourselves, then of course we could resort to outright criminalization of these obvious crimes against us, which is a further option. But the fact is that a people who have made themselves fit to govern themselves would not subject to any of this. So we would readily, willingly, and without hesitation engage in the establishment of the only solution to all these matters. And so this is a further reason that any people who are actually genuinely concerned with resolving these issues will take up sufficient study of these issues that not only do they make themselves one of an eventual union, but that they compel others, encourage others to take up this issue immediately, to understand that the whole reason the world is suffering this redundant, entirely avoidable terminal failure is our own iniquity and ineptitude. That is, if we spent a tiny fraction of the time at mastering these issues instead of the countless futile things that we spend our time at instead, we would have solution immediately. The world would be virtually 12 times as liquid immediately without any further improvements whatsoever. So to me, that we persist as victims of this mean that if we're not willing to do the little further work to master these issues, we are getting what we deserve. In other words, we're no better than suffering this terminal dispossession.
We all jumped into a yellow cab and went down to the Federal Reserve Bank. They wanted the bankruptcy case commenced before midnight of September 14. We kept pressing that this would be a terrible event. And at some point I used the word Armageddon, and they fully considered the consequences of what they were proposing. The effect on the market would be extraordinary.
You said this?
Yes.
This testament, of course, raises a further critical issue here. And that is that, of course, we've been coerced to almost compulsive, quote, investment, unquote, in the purported securities markets. Largely, we're driven to do so, looking for a true safe haven for our wealth. And in other words, because of the obfuscation of the currency, even if a bank was simply a safe storehouse for otherwise immutable tokens of our wealth, because those tokens in fact are not immutable, because they perpetually decline in value, owing at least to maldisposition. We're driven to think that to buy into this ruse ourselves, and so preservation of our wealth is at stake, and yet it's inevitably ruined by the processes of this obfuscation. So this offers us no protection, and yet we dispose ourselves to be further victims of our own ineptitude then, when we buy into the ruse, and then especially if we hope somehow to save it as the only vision we might have of persisting in the preservation of our wealth, which is impossible under